Frequency 1836 482. Armarium Vox Aeterna.
The Strangemen's No Access Radio.
Episode 2. Power. Hello there, re-embodied entities. I'm Jock Tuckaby, and welcome back to the Strangemen's No Access Radio. Recently, we've been getting questions and hearing certain rumors about our lack of an energy bill, with some people claiming through shrieks of agony as they are escorted away on a stretcher that we are in actuality siphoning hell energy from, let's see here, hell to power our facilities. Yeah, apparently Ricky, our accountant, accidentally leaked our annual budget in a public email. And the thing that everyone just had to focus on was the fact that we don't pay our energy bills, and not the fact we bought and sold the still beating heart of Elvis Presley. Come on, priorities, people. Anyway, the Strangemen Association would like to make an impartial formal announcement regarding these filthy, morally reprehensible lies. And here we go. The Strangemen Association has not and will never extract energy directly from the eternal depths of hell or any other afterlife. All people still believing this at 9:30 tomorrow will potentially die eventually. Now, this notice doesn't specify 9:30 a.m. or p.m. I say it's better to just live in constant fear of the future. In light of this recent notice, today we shall be giving you the whole history of power consumption in the Strangemen Association. Now, this whole operation, the association, was founded in 321 BCE, before the invention of electricity. So in place of modern power generators powered by coal, oil, and goat's milk, they had to use a big wheel contraption. It's kinda hard to explain, but in the middle of every important Strangeman site and facility, there would be a big pole, and at the base of that pole was a big wheel, and when that wheel was pushed, it would set off a whole bunch of pulley systems, logs, waterways, stuff like that to keep the place running. Kinda like in Waterworld, but instead of the ocean threatening the lives of the people on the ships, it was the nightmares beyond imagination, the ever-pressing darkness of the human soul, and the ocean. Now, I'd just like to make this clear, yes, before 1865, the big wheel was pushed by slaves that the association bought with money, blackmail, fear, and soul contracts that the previously mentioned slaves couldn't read. I'd also like to note that we here at the Strangemen Association never supported slavery. We only grossly profited off of it, and still practice it, but never mind, off topic. Now, the big wheel infrastructure proved to be unsustainable after the Great Fire of London in 1666, with all the London Association sites burning down due to the excess wood used for the many contraptions. However, there are a few facilities that still use these mechanisms, mostly because of the lack of funding and because they're hipsters. Many of our studies show that most of these hipster sites are on the ocean floor, so most of the slaves that have to push the wheel usually drown. The ones that don't are to be quarantined until a cure is found. But the rest of the sites quickly upgraded to electricity when we finally decided to secretly disseminate that information to the rest of the world in 1882. It was certainly a rough start with the whole blackout of 1890 that instigated a chain reaction through the fabric of society that inadvertently caused the 6th season of Family Guy. Regardless, association members had eventually gotten used to the new comforts and shortcuts that coal-powered electricity provided, especially after one of our dangerous creatures, the fire squid, escaped, and all site personnel were able to deal with it quickly with their lightning guns. Some of the hipster sites could only use their big wheel guns, which were all burnt and destroyed when put in contact with the fire squid. If only those poor fools had the foresight to be funded better. Moving on, after a few years, the senior staff began to realize that electricity had also become unsustainable, due to the demanding costs of our many security doors, computers, lights, monitors, cameras, and Queen Elizabeth's replacements. Our finances got so bad we had no money in the budget to feed the employees, and we eventually had to start feeding our staff toy food. Actually, the whole thing went down surprisingly well. I even have a burger phone or two from time to time. The shards of plastic mixed with the blood pouring from my mouth is quite a unique taste. We just didn't have the money in our budget to maintain our many facilities. But our situation quickly changed one day in the summer of 1989 when there was a news story about a woman finding a bone in one of her Big Joe's brand meat sausages. Big Joe's is a brand of meat product founded in 1919.5. They sold everything from beef, pork, horse, chicken, etc. Everyone was stumped about how a bone could have gotten into the sausage, and the Big Joe brand apologized to the woman with a 10% discount coupon. But that's not the strange bit. The strange bit is that the bone in question didn't belong to any human or animal on record. That's where we began to take notice of Big Joe and started investigating them. The association soon found out that despite the company managing to produce enough meat products to stay in competition with most brands, the Big Joe company only owned one meat processing plant in a remote location in Germany, near a small town called Tambach-Dieharz. We sent in our discovery team, codenamed Good Boys, into the factory. Tris Barkwell, our current station security detail and retired discovery agent, delightfully recorded an after-action report that she's kept unguarded in her back pocket. So I can play that for you right now, and here we go.
When we finally arrived at the factory, we had to usher all the employees out. Gave them our fake credentials as World Health Organization investigators. It was quite easy, as despite the size, there weren't many people working in the factory. Most of them were delivery people who sorted through all the packages and took the food to the shops and marketplaces. When we asked them if there was anyone working on the production line, they said they weren't sure, that they had never seen anyone working in the factory. Some of the older ones told us that the factory sort of ran itself, and they were only there to deliver whatever came out. When we tried later asking how the production line worked, none of them had a straight answer. Not sure if that's a safety violation, and I'm not some sort of OSHA inspector, but it confirmed that something weird was going on. As far as I knew, when we got in, the production line seemed normal at first. Most of the place was clean. The whole complex was a maze of conveyor belts, hooks, and machines, endlessly pumping out the meat into the packages. We tried to shut it down at the power before moving on, but there were no obvious control switches on any of the machines, and even when we tried to turn off the central power grid, the conveyor belts and everything just kept working. All we really managed to do was turn off the lights, leaving the large room we were in illuminated by the small green, yellow, and red lights on the machines of the production line. We began following the long line of conveyor belts, tenderizers, gears, and the grinders, trying to find the source of the meat. The entire time we didn't see any livestock that would have gone into the machines. No cows, no pigs, no sheep, and none of their remains or carcasses. We couldn't find any of the slaughterhouses inside or anywhere close enough to the factory, so even if they were shipping them in, there was no place to kill them. But despite that, there was still meat being shifted across the production line, being made into sausages, burger patties, steaks, and other shapes of meat. We were walking for much longer than we expected, through different rooms full of saws and hooks, and all the while we began to notice that as we traveled further through the production process, the meat seemed to be getting more rotten, more wild, if that makes sense. From what I could guess, I think the meat started out as rotten and weirdly shaped, and most of the machines in the back of the end of the factory were there to make the meat look more like real meat. We saw these mossy green steaks go through one machine and come out the other side as a raw shade of red. The further we went, we could see that the meat had been recolored, reshaped, deboned. Some perfumes had been added to remove the strange stench. Some pieces needed to be shaved and burned, eyes pulled out. Certain bits that looked a bit too human had to be removed. I think there was even one machine that had to pump blood back into the weird wet lumps. It got to a point where it was hard to even identify what was rolling across the conveyor belts by the truckloads. Every piece a different lump of something that I was unsure was ever meat. I asked one of my squad members if they had ever seen something inside a factory like this. One of them told us this story about when they were 8 or 9, a time they wandered off into the staff-only area of a local butcher's shop. They talked about the bags of meat that was strung from hooks hanging from the ceiling. Apparently they saw a pig's head back there before they were found and escorted out by an employee. They told us that the whole experience had kind of scared them into being a vegetarian for a while. It was only as they were talking about how cold it was in the back rooms when I realized how unnaturally warm it was in there. I couldn't see an AC or a climate control anywhere in the whole factory, and it was only getting warmer the further we traveled through the place. We were walking for what seemed like hours until we came to what I believed was the source of the meat, a place where all the conveyor belts led out. It was a room with a door that said, "Trespassing. Do not enter. Private property. Big Joe only." Despite all of the warnings on the door, the only thing stopping us was a standard padlock. I'm not sure if the guy who owned the place was an idiot. He had the whole system built to sell things that were definitely not meat, but one padlock in between the outside world and the still beating heart of the factory. When we broke the padlock and opened the door, a wave of sweaty heat had washed over us. We walked in and we saw something. I first thought it was a pig fused with a cow that had been Chernobyl a couple of times over. But when I focused on a different part of the body, I could see antlers and ears and skin, pufferfish gills, spider legs and donkey veins. Every time I looked at it, the body seemed to change, like a fractal made of skin and bones and teeth and meat, and it was trying to scream. It was hooked onto a machine that cut at whatever part of the thing it had a hold of. I could hear the sounds of a constant slicing and a wet, squelching thump as a cut of everything slapped itself onto the conveyor belt. We were mesmerized at the blob of flesh, and I'm not even sure if it noticed us. It occasionally had eyes, but then they would dart around wildly without focusing on anything before being obscured by a tongue or a liver. One of my squad members tried to get close, but they were, I'm not even sure if swallowed was the right word. Enveloped, maybe. The thing sort of grew around her as she got closer. It happened faster than I could process it. Just limbs and a mass surrounded her until she was gone. I'm not even sure the thing was aware that it was crushing her. That's when we started shooting, and I think it started growing faster. The machines the thing was attached to began to smoke and slice faster as if it was struggling to keep up with the engorged mass. As I fired wildly, I swear I could hear a muffled scream inside that thing. Sometimes I like to think that it was just the thing accidentally building a voice box inside of itself, in a part of the body without a mouth, but still, I know that it could have easily been my friend, crushed in a cage of flesh, bones, and cartilage. We were only there for a minute or two, attempting to kill the thing until all the lights in the room shut off. The machine slowed down and whirred to a halt. We were in pitch black darkness. I turned on my torch and started looking around for the thing, but it was gone. That stuffy heat was beginning to subside, but the stench of sweat and blood still lingered all over the room, especially on the machines. Looking around the room again was surreal. It was like we were dropped into a completely different place. I noticed that there were cables trailing all over the floor. I could see old office desks covered in a thick sheet of sweat, and ancient company advertisements saying that Big Joe steaks were out of this world. My best guess was that the room used to be used for office space before that thing moved in. The blob had enveloped and dominated all of our senses that I guess we just couldn't process the room around us. Apparently an agent had tripped over one of the cables and unplugged it, which is most likely why everything shut off. Following the cable, I saw it led to a hole in the wall. In fact, all of the cables led to the hole in the wall. The hole looked like an optical illusion, changing shapes and size the longer I looked at it. It had the same fractal quality that the mass had had. And even though I could never tell how big that meat thing was, I've always felt certain that it could have easily fit through.
FYI, that hole was an interdimensional portal, and the meat fractal thing that ate that one agent was a metaphor. We managed to secure the building after the owner, Big Joe himself, lost the factory through a game of rock, paper, scissors. He was also promptly fined and arrested for an overwhelming amount of work health and safety violations. It wasn't the meat blob that we were really interested in, though, it was the hole. Big Joe's Meathole, as some innocent junior researchers began to call it. We questioned Big Joe about his hole, and he told us that it came with the factory, and one day as a joke he decided to put a power plug into the hole to see if it would work, and surprisingly, it did. We managed to corroborate the statement when we chucked him into the lie-detecting ooze, but his statement was a lie, and we can no longer ask Big Joe any follow-up questions, as he now belongs to the lie-detecting ooze we threw him into. Many tests were performed and many dirty jokes about Big Joe's gaping hole were made over the next couple weeks, until they managed to open the hole wide enough for a person to walk through. The Strangemen Association sent in 3 of their most talented expedition agents, all with above 1 week's worth of experience. Pretty impressive, I know. Those brave travelers there that fateful day were never the same again. The things they saw in there were as unimaginable as can be. It was something that I just can't even describe. Doug can, though. Hey Doug, come here.
What?
Tell us about the Meathole dimension. Come on, don't be shy.
Okay, well, there was
Wow, that sounds amazing. Now report to the medical wing to get all that bleeding checked out.
Okay.
Anyway, we've managed to set up a massive electrical grid inside Big Joe's Meathole thanks to the brilliant work of senior staff member, the dead body of Nikola Tesla. It generates an unbelievable amount of power. In fact, I don't believe it. 11 squillion gigawatts is not an actual unit of measurement, Doug. Stop bleeding on your desk. Either way, because of this discovery, the Strangemen Association never had to worry about power again. 2 years later, after the Big Joe's Meathole grid went live, all Strangemen Association sites, facilities, factories, and radio stations, go team, managed to become entirely self-sufficient, and now the budget was free to spend money on employees, real food, and the still-beating heart of Elvis Presley. Look at the leaked budget plan. It costs less than you would reasonably expect for the heart of an international treasure, continuously pumping blood through vessels that connect to nothing post-mortem. It's making a real mess behind some glass cabinet somewhere. But either way, Big Joe's Meathole was one of the best things to happen to the association for quite some time. It allowed us to work freely and independently for just under 100 years. We don't even get power outages anymore. No short circuits, no fires caused by plugging too many things into one power block, nothing. Although over the years we've been getting some odd complaints from the staff. Site 32 data analyst Jerry Ullman complained that their computer stopped working. When we checked, we couldn't find anything wrong with the computer itself, aside from a pig snout growing out of the RAM. People from the IT department, after working on the system service for too long, would occasionally receive bad rashes covered in eyelashes. In fact, before we went live today, our microphones weren't picking up the gain we needed, so we had to remove a few teeth from the recording equipment. The association is known to be called many things that we'll deny outright and disappear you for. Reckless, authoritarian, occultic, but we're not stupid. We know what's happening. Big Joe told us everything we needed to know about his prized impossibility before we fed him to the lie detector ruse, about how it wasn't born and about how it was grown. We understand the risks. We know the price we're paying. But if we were to revert back to relying on the burning of old Dinosauria and the kindness of oil barons, well then most likely all of this would stop and we wouldn't have to experience that smell from every fuse box. That mixture of overwhelming rot and sweat. That smell which gives some of the older staff members a pang of nostalgia for one of Big Joe's juicy chops. We could potentially fix it all and stop people from disappearing into a ball of their own fingers. But 11 squillion gigawatts an hour, how could we have passed up that opportunity? Besides, we've only had 8 disappearances so far, and we've got people to burn. Anyway, that's all the time we have for today. Just a general recap, we get our power from Big Joe's gaping hole, not a hell portal, and the fact that the hole is covered inside and out with pentagrams is just a stylish fashion choice. Thanks for listening to the Strangemen's No Access Radio. Remember to always check your eyes in the reflection of mirrors, and tune in next week for the only radio station brave enough to deny the truth. Good night.
This episode of The Strangemen's No Access Radio was written, edited, and directed by Lachlan Millard. This episode featured Remus Douglas as Doug the Sound Guy, Riley Bussenshut as Tris Barkwell, and Ryder Gavin as Jock Tuckaby. Thanks for listening.